Hello, and welcome to another episode of the More Than Digital Marketing podcast, the podcast about digital marketing and so much more. I'm your host today, Barnaby, and normally we'd have the pleasure of saying, and my co host is, but best laid plans of mice and men. No one's here today to help out. So, unfortunate things happen, right? And we thought the show must go on. We'll try and keep it going. So, we're going to have a bit of a shorter episode, a bit more of an intimate episode with myself. So, get yourself a coffee. I've got mine. Sit back and enjoy these tones. So, today I'm going to be talking to you about tone of voice on LinkedIn. And this has come from conversations and questions we've been asked at a previous event and from a kickoff call with a new client this week. And that was kind of an observation that the tone of voice people are using on LinkedIn, it has changed so much. So at its core, really, LinkedIn is a job site. It's where people can apply for jobs and it's where people post updates about their jobs. It's basically your online CV. But over the last few years, it's developed into so much more as people have really pushed personal branding. It's quite rare I actually now see a job update, and I'm more likely to see pictures of what people have been up to over the weekend, challenges they're facing day to day, and life updates. And I personally don't have an issue with that. I think the more interaction we have as humans on a human level is really, really cool. And I think LinkedIn gives a great space for that, for those kind of general, kind of a bit professional conversations. Um, but what I tend to find is you don't get the absolute extremes that you might get on Instagram or you might get on Facebook. And I guess by extremes, I mean like those platforms, Instagram especially, is a really great place to talk about your hobbies. And so maybe it's fitness or running, or maybe it's arts, maybe it's, I don't know, insert hobby here, cooking, right? And you don't tend to get so much of that on LinkedIn. And if you do, you get it at a very like basic level. And it tends to be more about human to human interaction, leadership, people talking about things they're passionate about at work. And I really enjoy that personally. But the lines definitely have blurred. So if you have like a scale of 1 to 10, one being really, really casual, let's say that's X or Twitter, right? Where, okay, we probably go beyond casual there. We go into like some like unquestionable stuff, but fine. That's number one. And then 10 is how you would probably talk at, like, I don't know, a TED talk maybe, or no, that's probably not right. Maybe how you'd write your CV, a really formal document. I think previously we would have seen LinkedIn at maybe that 7 or 8 level, right? Quite formal, very corporate focused, but conversational as well. But I think it's probably dropped itself down to maybe a 5, maybe a 6, somewhere in that level, and it's probably only going to get lower and lower as time goes on. And we've seen, apologies while I just quickly find the webpage in question here. I saw someone, Amy Cooper. I do not know Amy Cooper, but thank you for posting this on LinkedIn. She said, "Is LinkedIn the new Twitter?" And she highlighted in particular a post by Monzo, who we've highlighted on this podcast before, has been quite a progressive disruptor in a well-established market in banking and finance, right? And they've highlighted a post where Monzo have said on LinkedIn, completely unjustified reasons to be angry in the office. Bold capitals. Number one, someone sitting at my desk, brackets, we have hot desks. I can relate to this straight away. We have recently, the team at Optix has grown loads. And whereas for the first maybe 9 months of my role here, I had a desk and I've got a picture of my girlfriend on there. I've marked my territory. Every so often I'll come in and my monitor will have moved, or there'll be a coffee ring stain and I'll be like, someone's sat here. I don't like it, but it is hot desking, so I've got no reason to not like it. Someone's drinking out of my mug. The mugs are communal. We have a lot of these star mugs here, if you can see this on the video, Optix branded mugs and some Christmas ones. But I know some people do have their mugs. Some of them are like, one will say, "James, you're an awesome beekeeper." And you try and stick away from those. But I would be annoyed if I was him and someone was drinking from his mug, right? And then my laptop is slow. Brackets, I've got 68 tabs open. That would be quite a quiet day for some people in the office. Their level of tabs they have is horrendous. But anyway, that is a really casual conversational post. It's tongue in cheek coming from a bank on LinkedIn. It's really, really different from what you might have seen from, I don't know, a more established place like HSBC or Nationwide on LinkedIn years ago. And I think that is really useful because it's pushing boundaries, and it's just making it a bit more conversational, right? And it's kind of blurring the lines a little bit between what people would post on their personal accounts to what they post on their brand accounts now, which is really, really interesting because we interact with it as people. And even though there is B2C and there's B2B, there's that B2B is still a person talking to a person rather than I am this business talking to this business. There's two people on the end of that. And I think sometimes we get lost in I've got to speak in this business's tone and the business has to read it as the business tone. And it doesn't quite work, right? We're all humans. We're all humans talking to each other. So I wish personally that more people would take that leap like Monzo have to push their boundaries and maybe go from that 10 on the corporate scale lower to like a 4 or a 5. And that boundary is going to really, really differ depending on your brand, your values. Some things are obviously really serious to talk about. So I don't know why this comes to my head, but like a funeral directors, right? That would probably, well, definitely be in really poor taste to be posting memes and things like that, right? But something like banking, which is functional, it's serious, but there's not necessarily like an emotional connection to it. Then let's bring that fun, let's bring that humor into it where appropriate to kind of make that human connection with it, right? But here's my number one thing for it is I think you have to be really, really brave as a social media marketer to push those boundaries. And you've got to have buy-in from the people above because social media is so, I want to say viewable. I don't know if that's the right word, if that even is a word. I'm going to say accessible, but I'm not sure that's the right word. But it's so easy to see social media on people's phones. So if you were to push the boundaries a little bit, it's not going to take long if it does well for one of your key stakeholders to see it. And if that's something that's not been agreed or something that they don't feel is right, you will know about it quite quickly as well, right? So having that buy-in right from the top and that trust to push the boundaries, understanding how far you can push them as well, is really, really key as part of this. I want to highlight an example of where that's been done right, but then really kind of pulled apart. Was a local council to us. I'm not going to say what it is. We live in Exeter, so you can kind of guess the local councils around us. They posted a really funny tongue-in-cheek Facebook post, which was basically they had a problem where they had to ask people to move their cars from certain spaces in a town so that they could put a shipment container in those spaces so that building work that was going on could happen. And that's quite a bland message to say move your cars, etc. But they took some fun into it and they basically said, well, if you don't move your cars, the shipment container is going to go there anyway. And they very quickly, I assume, photoshopped a shipment container on top of parked cars at an angle and dust and destruction, right? It was really funny. Okay, it got me to stop and look at it, and it got a really, really good response. I think the likes and comments were like into the hundreds each, which for a local town council, this one in particular, is a great post. I could imagine at their end of year report, it would definitely be in the top 3 posts they've done this year. But it was pushing the boundaries a little bit. Now, what they said wasn't offensive or anything. It was at best tongue in cheek, but some of the comments were from people of an older generation, I think, saying this is silly, council money, taxpayers' money being wasted on this and stuff, and like the reality of it, just dropping a picture of a shipment container onto cars is probably a 1-minute job, if not less, if you're really skilled on Canva, let alone Photoshop and Adobe Suite, right? But it was a real mixed bag of people saying this is silly and people saying no, this is great, like I would never have seen this if they hadn't have done this and it hadn't got this traction. So there was a real conflict there, right? And what ended up happening was when you checked back on it later that day, the copy had been changed. The picture hadn't, but the copy had. And I think that's a real shame because either someone upstairs, if you like, has seen that and not been happy with it, or someone has complained to the people upstairs and not been happy about it, and they've had to change it. When actually it achieved its goals, lots of people knew about what was going on. No offense was caused, but it just didn't quite sit right with that audience. So maybe that's a cautionary tale and an understanding that even if you are in these kind of functional roles where there's no real downside, I guess, to making fun or light of quite a serious topic or product or service, just to be wary of like the tone of voice and what impact that could have on your potential audience, or even if it's not your potential audience, if it picks up traction, the wider audience as well. So I think where this is most suited to, in terms of pushing boundaries on LinkedIn, is probably maybe some like consumer products and things like that. Maybe some services. So I'm thinking things like Monzo is a great example, but you've got brands that do really good examples of unhinged content. I think it's Nutter Butter. That is a real experience. If you look up their Instagram, that's an experience like I've never had anywhere else. So just look at that with caution. It's wild, but that kind of vibe. I think if you're solicitors, maybe that's somewhere where we're a bit more cautious because of all the highly sensitive topics we're talking about. We don't want to be making light of them, but that's maybe where we can move from an 8 to a 7, right? I don't know how long I've been talking for. Let's just quickly check that. 11 minutes, 12 minutes or so. I think that's about right for a single person podcast episode, right? Thank you for listening. This is not a plan for us to continue doing videos like this. So if you've hated it, apologies, but normal service resumed in the future. However, if you've really liked it, obviously this is a little bit easier for us to do with one person than two, and if you think the quality is good enough, maybe it's something we'll look at again, but it's definitely not on the cards at the moment. This is just a spur of the moment thing. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to get in touch with us to submit any questions or topics or anything like that, our email address, I always get this wrong, podcast@optixsolutions.co.uk. If you want to contact me directly, my email address is barnaby@optixsolutions.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn, where I try and post stuff about that 4 out of 5 level, at Barnaby St. Anton. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day, a great weekend, wherever you are. Take care.